Okay, let's dive right into what is honestly a staggering historical mystery. Today, in this explainer, we're going to explore the economic history of India, and we're looking at exactly how one of the absolute greatest wealth transfers in human history actually happened, step by step.
So picture this. Imagine a single nation controlling a massive quarter of all global wealth. Well, that was India right before the 18th century. It was just packed with gold, diamonds, spices, textiles, you name it. Actually, it was so incredibly prosperous that it was proudly known as the Golden Bird, or Sone ki Chiriya. I mean, think about that, controlling nearly 25% of the world's entire wealth. But fast forward to the mid 20th century. By the time the British Raj finally left, India's share of the global economy had literally crashed to less than 4%. 4%! That is a monumental drop, and it really sets the stage for what we're breaking down today. So you've got to wonder, right? How exactly did one of the absolute richest nations on Earth become one of the poorest? Well, it wasn't an accident. No way. It was a highly systematic, multi-stage wealth extraction that spanned several generations. Stick with me here as we unpack exactly how this giant historical heist went down. Let's start with Phase 1, the taxation trap. So back in 1757, after the British East India Company won the Battle of Plassey, they gained this incredibly crucial power, the right to collect taxes directly from the Indian people. And this created what our source material essentially calls a flawless system of plunder. Here's how it worked. Step 1, they collected taxes from Indians. Step 2, they took that exact same tax money and used it to buy Indian goods, cotton, silk, spices. And then, Step 3, they turned around and exported those very same goods back to Europe for a 100% profit. The Indian people were literally paying for their own exports. It's wild to think about. Obviously, this created a massive, continuous outflow of wealth. But you might be wondering, what on earth happened to India's world-leading domestic industries while all this was going on? Well, the answer to that leads us straight into a truly eye-opening economic shift. Which brings us right to Phase 2, crushing the textile industry. Right, so before the British even arrived, Indian weavers were already producing these super premium textiles that were famous all across Europe. Now, to eliminate that fierce competition, a deliberate tariff imbalance was engineered. The British started slapping massive taxes, we're talking up to 80%, on Indian clothes trying to enter Britain. But at the same time, they were completely flooding the Indian markets with cheap, machine-made clothes from British factories that weren't taxed at all. And the human cost here, it was just absolutely devastating. Those traditional Indian weavers simply couldn't compete with steam-powered factories under those conditions. Millions of people lost their livelihoods almost overnight. Entire wealthy textile hubs, places like Dhaka and Murshidabad, were completely ruined. Almost in the blink of an eye, India went from a global manufacturing powerhouse to being reduced to a mere supplier of raw materials. But the extraction didn't stop at textiles. Nope. Next, they came for the very food Indians ate. So keep the video playing because we really need to look at how the entire agricultural sector was systematically reshaped. Let's move to Phase 3, cash crops and deadly famines. Okay, so farmers were now being heavily pressured to just stop growing essential, life-sustaining food crops like wheat and rice. Instead, they were literally mandated to pivot and grow cash crops, things like indigo, opium, cotton. Basically, the exact raw materials needed to fuel those British factories and their global trade networks, especially with China. Because of this forced shift, there was zero agricultural buffer left for the farmers. So, when small droughts happened, they cascaded into absolute massive food shortages. In fact, during the Great Bengal Famine of 1943 alone, an estimated 3 million innocent Indians died of starvation. 3 million. And it's crucial to understand, according to the sources, these casualties weren't just some inevitable result of nature or bad weather. During these massive shortages, the colonial administration actually continued to export Indian grain for profit. Plus, essential food supplies were actively being stockpiled for British soldiers rather than being distributed to the starving local population. So these colonial policies directly engineered the terrifying severity of these famines. Okay, so we've seen the taxation loop, the destruction of the textile industry, and this massive agricultural shift. But how do modern economists actually quantify a multi-phase wealth extraction on this kind of massive scale? Well, that brings us to Phase 4, the drain theory. The term itself comes from the renowned Indian nationalist Dadabhai Naoroji. He's the one who actually coined the drain of wealth theory to formally define and explain how the British Raj was systematically moving wealth right out of the Indian subcontinent. He basically put a name to that exact process we just talked about, using local taxes to buy local goods for foreign profit. And to put a really concrete financial figure on all of this, modern economist Utsa Patnaik has done some incredible extensive calculations on this specific historical period. And according to her research, between the years 1765 and 1938, the British drained an astronomical $45 trillion out of India. Let that sink in for a second. $45 trillion. That number is so huge, it's honestly kind of hard to wrap your head around. But to put that into perspective, it represents a continuous, highly systematic extraction of capital, goods, and resources over 173 years. This is the literal numerical representation of a nation dropping from 25% of global wealth all the way down to less than 4%. Now, it's also really important we address a super common historical counterpoint here, the railways. Right? You often hear the extensive Indian railway network cited as this big gift of colonial infrastructure. But the economic data shows a totally different story. The railways were actually funded entirely by Indian taxpayers at incredibly high interest rates, which directly benefited British investors. And honestly, more importantly, those tracks were specifically laid out to quickly transport raw materials from the interior straight to the ports for export. Oh, and to rapidly move British troops around to control local rebellions. It was fundamentally a tool to speed up the wealth extraction, not some charitable gift. So, where does all this leave us today? I mean, after 173 years of this deeply structured economic drain, how does a nation even begin to recover from losing $45 trillion and having its core industries totally dismantled? Let's look at our final chapter, Rising from the Ashes. When India finally gained its independence back in 1947, it was left with a historically drained, totally broken economy, a starved agricultural sector, and just massive, widespread poverty. But if you look in India today, the narrative arc has completely shifted. Showing just unbelievable resilience and economic growth, India has truly risen from those ashes. And in a pretty fascinating twist of historical fate, they've actually surpassed the UK economy to become one of the top global financial powerhouses today. It's honestly a truly remarkable historical journey, isn't it? From the Golden Bird to the Great Loot, and now back to a modern economic giant. So I'm curious, what part of this history shocked you the most? Was it the massive textile tariffs, the forced shift to cash crops, or was it that mind-blowing $45 trillion figure? Let us know down in the comments. Keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you in the next explainer.